Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm starting this video for you know friends of mine and people who are interested in knowing something about how to play piano, understanding how to play it. There's a process for it. One of the first steps I think that someone should take is to understand theory, knowing what to play and how to play it, unless you want to do it strictly by ear. Some people are very talented in that they can pick up an instrument and go right ahead and play it. The other way is to learn theory, which in my opinion, is very important. And that way you get a better foundation, you understand how to play something and where to go to play it. So I wanted to start off with the staff, clefs, and ledger lines. Okay. The staff, the staff is the foundation upon, which notes are really drawn. The modern staff, as we know, comprises 5 lines and 4 spaces. Every line or space on the staff represents a white key on a keyboard. Clefs assign individual notes to certain lines or spaces, and 2 clefs are normally used. The treble, which is for the right hand, and the bass is for the left hand. First, let's discuss the treble clef. Also, it's called the G clef. Why? Because the staff line on which that clef wraps around, shown in red over here, is shown as G. Any note placed on this line becomes G. The note on the space above G is A. You have to remember that there is not an H note. The highest note we have is G. After that, it starts all over again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then repetition again and again and again. So saying that, the process continues. The ledger lines will solve our dilemma. Now, what is a ledger line? Well, a ledger line is a small line that extends the staff when we run out of room. With the ledger line drawn, like we can place the A way up there, above the A, you can add other notes with what they call ledger lines. So let's discuss that bass clef. Bass clef, and it's also the bass clef is called the F clef. Why? Because the staff line between the 2 dots of the clef is F. Now we'll get into the staff lines and the spaces and the lines shortly. Now we can fill the rest of the staff with notes. Now, what I just broke down for you is the right hand, which is the G clef. The left hand is the bass clef. And that's called the grand staff. And it theoretically, it's a staff that consists of 11 lines. Now, watch what happens when we eliminate the middle line. We end up with 2 regular staffs. By adding a treble clef to the top staff and a bass clef to the bottom staff, we can see that the relationship between the 2 staffs. Notice how the 2 clefs are joined by the C, shown in red. That C is commonly called the middle C, since it corresponds to the middle line on the grand staff. That middle C is what separates the right hand from the left hand, and it's a ledger line middle C. So now we just covered the right hand, the left hand, which the right hand is the G clef, left hand is the F clef, and that's the grand staff. Now, next on the agenda is we're going to go in note duration. Okay, notes. The length of the note, I should say the length of time that a note is played, that's called a note duration. And that's determined by the type of note. As you see in front of you here, you have, from left to right, you have a whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, and a 16th note. So let's start off with the whole note. Okay, the whole note, that's the longest note duration in modern music. We've got the half note, which is half, that's why it's called half note. half note of a duration. Okay, then we have two half notes, just to be, to give you a better idea. Two half notes occupy the same amount of time as one whole note. Now, as far as the quarter note is the quarter note is a fourth of a quarter of a whole note. Okay, that being said, then we have 4 quarters occupy the same amount of time as one whole note. 2 quarter notes equal the duration of a half note. I hope you understand that. Sometimes it gets confusing, but it's really very simple if you break it down. Then you have an eighth note. Now, eighth notes are different than the quarters, because the quarters and what it is because it's a small duration. So what they do, they put a flag. Each flag, what it does, it halves the value of the note. So an eighth note has 1 flag. Now, therefore, 2/8 notes occupy the same amount of time as 1 quarter note. 2/8 equal a quarter. Okay, 2 quarters equal a half. 2 halves equal a whole. Follow that? All right, I just went over that. That you have 2/8 equal a quarter. Now, 16ths have 2 flags, and the same process, where a 16th note has 2 flags, halving the value again. So 2 16th notes, all right, they equal the duration of an eighth note. 4 16th notes occupy the same time as 1 quarter note. And looking at that, although it's possible to have notes with 3 more flags, but they're very seldom used because the duration is so minute. So this charter should give you a really good, strong idea of how it's all broken down. As you see, 16th notes, they have their halves into the eighths into the quarters into the half notes, and the half notes into the whole note. On to the next section, measures and time signatures. Very important. You got the vertical black bars. They're called bar lines. And they divide the staff into measures. Now, the staff has been split into 2 measures, okay, as you see the lines just appear. Time signatures, what they do, they define the amounts and the type of notes that each measure, as you see right here, each measure, that's a measure, they would be the one that's broken up, and they define what's inside that note. So the first measure is in 4/4 time, and the second measure in 3/4 time. Now, what does that mean? First measure, what it means by having 4/4 is that it contains 4 quarter notes. The second measure has 3 quarter notes because it's 3 quarter notes. Quarter note gets a count. All right. So we'll discuss the non-quarter note time signature, like 6/8 right here, as you see that, and you have the 3 seconds. Time signatures such as this are rarely used. They're mostly 4/4, 3/4, or cut time. Where they'll take a 4/4 and have it cut. What they call cut time. But that's basically what you should know as far as the measures and time signatures. Rest durations. As you can see, you have different types of rests. Now, rests, they represent periods of silence in a measure. Okay, each type of rest, which we're going to go over right now, is an example of a duration with a certain type of note. For example, both a quarter rest, I should say, and a quarter note occupy the same amount of time. Okay, as you see the correlation between the quarter rest and the quarter note. So while that note would make a sound, the rest is silent. Simple, right? To demonstrate this, to fill in with it, 4/4 time, here's a 4/4, you have 4 quarter notes. When played, all 4 notes are sounded. Next, and we're going to replace them with the second quarter note with a rest. Okay? You see that? When played, the second beat is now silent. Now, the next, we're going to discuss other type of rests. For instance, a whole rest, as you see right there, it is drawn as a box descending from the 4th staff line. That's a whole rest. A half rest, it looks like a hat, occupies the same amount of time as a half note. And so if you draw it as a box ascending from the middle staff line, that's the way it looks. So like notes, rests can have flags. We talked about 8th note and 16th notes. Well, the same thing applies with rests. When you have an 8th rest, all right, you have that slight flag for the 8th note. 16th has 2 flags to represent the rest, and it's the same duration. Although 30 seconds are rare, they do exist. So they would look something on that, as you see it right there. So this is the rest chart, the way it's broken down. You have the whole rest, you have the half rest, you have the quarter rest, 16th rest, 8th rest, 16th rest, and it can go to the 32nd, which is very, very rare. So that's the whole explanation that you should know about rests. Dots and ties are unique in the sense. Now let's just take a look at this right here. You have a dotted note and you have a tie. Augmentation dots, that's what they're called, and tenuto ties, that's what ties are called. There are 2 types of ties. Now the dot, what it does, it increases duration by 1/2. So when you have that dot in front of it, you have, for instance, you have a quarter note right here, a dot, what they call a dot, a quarter note. So you have the quarter note plus you add another half of a count to that dotted note. So it's, now if you go, it's actually what it is it's like an eighth note. We put it there, but it's the duration is still half of it, and the way it looks here, as you see it, you have the dotted up top, dotted equals a quarter plus an eighth. I prefer the symbol of halves than the eighth, but it's correct. But it still signifies the same thing. Ties, what they do is they bring the connection, and you hold the note slightly longer. See there you have 2 quarter notes here, so that would be 2 counts, and they're used to let the duration of a note travel across barriers, such as the measure line in this example right there. The 4th and the 5th notes are now combined, so you hold them on those 2 measures. So if I were to strike, and that's an F note, by the way, I would strike that F note and I would hold that for the 4th count and the 1st count of the measure, from the 1st measure to the 2nd measure, and that's the way you do it. There you go, we got it, and that's the breakdown on it, so you get an idea. And those are the basics that you really need to know. Now they have dotted holes, but seldom are used. So you have that whole thing where it signifies. You can take a picture of it or just go over it, but that's the breakdown on dots and ties. In this section of steps and accidentals, now I'm starting to get into the nitty-gritty of theory. I know we've been covering the basics. Some people really don't know the basics. They see dotted notes or they see ties, and to them it's they don't understand that. But it's very important to know the staff, the grand staff. It's very important to know the lines and spaces, which we'll go over, and also we talked about measures, We talked about time signatures, and now we're going to get into the steps and accidentals. Now, as you look at that, we've got 5 lines and 4 spaces. You have a keyboard right there. A half step or a semitone is the distance between one key on the keyboard to the next. So you have this back and forth. So you have starting from left to right, that's a C. If you take that as a middle C, that C to that first black key, that's a semitone. Western music is based on semitones. Eastern music is based on quarter tones. So that's being said right there. So key 1 to key 2 is a half a step, since they are next to each other. Now, a half a step is not always from a white key to a black key. All right, in this example, you have no black key in the middle, and that's an E and an F. This is an E and this is an F. You have C, D, E, F. No black key, and that's considered a half a step. Now, a whole step or a whole tone is simple tone. It's the same distance as 2 half steps. Key 1 to key 3 is considered a whole step. Key 1 to key 2 is a half step. Now, an accidental, getting to accidentals, what is an accidental? An accidental is a sign used to raise or lower the pitch of a note. As you see on the left, that's considered a flat. It's a flat. Now, the one to the right is considered a sharp. The flat keys, they lower by a half a step, while the sharp keys, they raise by a half a step. That's an example. If you're on this note right there, okay, let's examine, just take a look at the black key in between C and D, okay? This is your C and this is your D, all right? This key could be called a C sharp or a D flat, depending on where you're at. But since we're going into this a sharp, we would be calling this a C sharp, and it's a half step above the C. Now, it can be called a D flat. If you're going from the D and you're dropping it down, it'll be a D flat. Another example would be E to F. Now, if you're on E and you flat it, okay, that would be an E flat. The black key below the E would be called an E flat. Likewise with the F. If you're in the F and you sharpen it, okay, if you're in the F and you sharpen it, this would be, let's see, F could be called an E sharp. So let's just go over that one more time, okay? We have a C to D, well, C to C, half a step is a C sharp, all right? You see the arrow there. If you're on D and you flat it, you're on D flat. Another example would be the E, and you have an E could also be called an F flat. If you're on the F and you go about half a step down, that'll be called an F flat, all right? Likewise, the F could be called an E sharp. All right, so we have this fact that whenever a certain pitch has multiple names, it is called an inharmonic spelling. Do you get that right? Inharmonic spelling. So this is a couple double flats. Now, double flats and double sharps. A very simple explanation. You just double the position. You flat the note twice, or you sharp the note twice. So while flats and sharps, they alter note by half a step. The double flats, they double sharp alter note by a whole step, which I just explained. So when you're typing, you can use X to represent a double flat and a BB to represent a double flat. So if you have right here and you're both on D and you have an E double flat, have the same pitch, since you can reach D by going a whole step, instead of a half. if you want me to explain that further, you know, if you're on E and you double flat that E, you would wind up on D. Also, if you're, same thing pertains to C. If you double sharp the C, okay, going to a D because you're sharpening it. And finally, what we have is a natural sign. Now, what a natural sign does that it cancels out any accidentals and it returns the note to its original white key. Now, I want you to know that this is very important. You're going to see this in action when you start reading the music, and you're going to see the flats and the sharps and some double flats, maybe. There's not as many, and then a lot of compositions and the naturals. But you definitely will see flat sharps and naturals all over the place. So that's being said with steps and accidentals that you should know.